Thanks so much, Jim and Mrs. Bush. It's just a very exciting day. I'm just thrilled to be here. We're going to have Saad up on the screen. Can he hear what I'm saying now? Okay. Hey, Saad. How are you? Okay, that makes me feel good. Jim said briefly something about the NED. Let me note that the NED was founded in 1983. It was launched by an address that President Ronald Reagan gave at Westminster on June 8, 1982. And, you know, we're now celebrating the centennial of the birth of Ronald Reagan. And let's not forget that he had something to do with this work, too. And he gave a very visionary address in Westminster that led to our creation. And then in 2003, on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the NED, we invited President Bush to give a 20th anniversary speech. And we hoped that it would be as important as the Westminster address that President Reagan gave on June 8, 1982. And indeed it was. This was the speech in which President Bush enunciated in the most comprehensive way for the first time his freedom agenda for the world, but especially for the Middle East. And it was a very radical speech because no one believed that it was possible. The title of this conference is The Wave of Freedom, and this idea of wave comes from the idea of Samuel Huntington of the waves of democracy. And the great third wave of democracy tripled the number of democracies in the world between the 1970s and the 1990s. But the Middle East was the one region of the world that was untouched by the third wave. And it led to people trying to explain why, the theory of Arab exceptionalism. It cannot happen in the Middle East for a lot of reasons. And the significance of President Bush's 20th anniversary address to the NED was that he said, no, it is possible in the Middle East. Not only is it possible, it will happen. And indeed, with the Arab Spring, an article that Elliot Abrams, who's with us today, wrote in the Washington Post, what the Arab Spring did was it proved that President Bush was right in what he said in the 2003 address on our 20th anniversary. And I want to thank President Bush with this new center for continuing to advocate and affirm the idea of democratic universalism, because if it was not possible in the Middle East, then democracy is not a universal idea, but it is possible. People are sacrificing for freedom in the Middle East, and therefore democracy is indeed a universal idea. It's my great honor to introduce an old friend, Saad Ibrahim, who I've been friends with for 20 years. When we look at the revolutions that have taken place in the Middle East in 2011, people sort of look at look at the young generation. This was a revolution of a new generation of tech-savvy young people who led the struggles in the Jasmine Revolution in Tahrir Square. But there were people who preceded them. There were people who laid the foundation for what happened in 2011. And Saad was arguably the principal figure in the Middle East who laid that foundation. When we think of 1989, we think of people like Milovan Djilas in Yugoslavia. We think of Andrei Sakharov in the Soviet Union. We think of Václav Havel in Czechoslovakia. Well, these were dissidents. Saad was a democratic dissident in Egypt, and he paid the price for it. On June 30th of the year 2000, he was arrested. 11 people in his organization, the Ibn Khaldun Center, were arrested for the crime of observing the Egyptian elections. And what's significant about this arrest is that it took place 3 days after Egypt attended the founding meeting of the Community of Democracies in Warsaw and affirmed the Warsaw Declaration was a statement of democratic principles. And this was the tribute that dictators pay to democracy, that they have to seem democratic by affirming those principles. But of course, Saad was thrown into prison 3 days after the Warsaw Declaration was approved. And we and others used that Warsaw Declaration to show the hypocrisy of the Egyptian government and try to argue to get Saad out of prison. Saad, when you were in prison, somebody you met in prison was a British individual of Pakistani origin who used to be a member of the radical group, the Hezb Tahrir. His name was Majid Nawaz, who's head now today of the Killiam Foundation. I want you to know he's with us today. He's not met you yet, but you and Ayman Noor, when you were in prison, had a lot of discussions with him, and he'll have a question he'll like to say hello to you today, and I'm going to give him that opportunity. We're very happy to have, and I will hear a little bit about the Killiam Foundation from Majid Nawaz later. Saad spent 3 years in prison. He was released. I was proud to attend the reopening of the Ibn Khaldun Center on June 30th, 2003, at a conference that Saad had. Saad continued to fight for freedom and democracy, and then in 2007, he attended Václav Havel's Forum 2000 conference, where he met President Bush and spoke with President Bush. And because of that conversation, Saad was told, don't come back to Egypt. He was literally forced into exile because he was threatened with imprisonment if he came back to Egypt, and possibly death. So Saad then had to spend 3 years in exile. We obviously dealt with each other a lot, but then right before February the 11th, he went back to Egypt in the midst of that revolution, when it was reaching its breaking point. And what an experience that must have been. Saad, we are proud to be able to hear what you have to tell us today about the conditions in Egypt, the prospect for democracy in Egypt, the significance both for the Middle East and globally of what has transpired over the last little bit more than 5 months. We'd like to hear from you also, if you would, about the possibilities that these remarkable events, can they contribute to a new fourth wave of democratization? Freedom has been in decline in recent years. Is it possible that what we're seeing in the Middle East can trigger a new fourth wave of democratization? We're just delighted to have you with us today, Saad. It's good to see you. It's great to have this kind of technology, because I know they destroyed your physical health when you were in prison, and having the ability to be part of this meeting without having to travel all this way is a great convenience. And we're just delighted to have you with us, Saad. Welcome.
Carl, yes, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak to you, the audience in Dallas. I wish I were with you in person, but I'm gratified that another new generation of Egyptian activists are there. I know them, and they give me a lot of confidence about the continuity of our struggle for democracy and freedom. Carl, you and President Bush are among the genuine contributors to our success. If there is an Arab Spring of freedom, and I believe there is, and I hope it will spread everywhere in the Middle East, we have to give many people credit, both inside, like the young activists that you have in Dallas on this occasion, many millions of people back home, but also friends abroad. And Carl, you were among those, and I will always remember your visits to us before, during, and after all of these revolutions have taken place. Now, do I believe that democracy can strike roots? Absolutely, it has. And the reason I'm not with you in Dallas is precisely because I'm attending a conference here in Brussels in which Democrats from Eastern Europe, from Russia, and from the Middle East were gathered in the community of democracy. You made a reference to that, and the community of democracy continues to meet, and this is about the third or the fourth meeting that I attend with them. And of course, we celebrated the Spring of Freedom. We all remembered all the pioneers who have worked for that spring to come true. And of course, we were inspired by Eastern and Central Europe. We were inspired by many heroes around the world, freedom fighters around the world, and of course, the United States and presidents of the United States, starting with, President Wilson, back after the First World War. It inspired a revolution for self-determination in Egypt, India, and elsewhere in the Third World. And then there was a Kennedy, and there was an Eisenhower, and there was, of course, George W. Bush. All of these have shown us that there is a continuity in American commitment to democratic values and freedom. And I hope, and I'm sure, that this will continue and that you will see the Middle East, a pivotal region of the world, continue and make its democratic transformation complete.
Saad, thank you very much for those opening comments. Let me just say that I'm going to have a couple of questions for you just to continue this discussion, but then we're going to open it up to the floor so that people will have a chance to participate. So you can start thinking of your question now. I've told Majid that he's the first one. But Saad, we have a mutual friend in Larry Diamond, who's out at Stanford, and Larry just posted an article on the Council on Foreign Relations website this week, which was very pessimistic about what's happening right now, and I'd like you to respond to it. I mean, he said that most of the Arab political openings are closing faster and more harshly than happened in other regions, save for the Soviet Union. I think we know what Larry is talking about. I know the challenges you're up against in Egypt. I just also read an article by Ala Aswani, the author of The Yacoubyan Building, a very interesting novel that some people thought described why the revolution happened in Egypt. He even went so far, Saad, as to say, and I'll quote from this article, that there is a conspiracy being carried out step by step so that Egypt slides into complete chaos to pave the way for something the enemies of the revolution want to bring about. Democratic dissidents are being arrested, but people who commit crimes against religious minorities are not being tried or persecuted. He's deeply worried about the role that the police are playing. He's looking for the military to play a more positive role. He's concerned that if this chaos continues, there'll be people demanding a return to order. Can you address these concerns, Saad?
Well, Carl, these are real concerns, and we would be naive to think that the Arab Spring is going to go without an Arab Khamsin. And Arab Khamsin, for those who do not know, Egypt is a period of about a month in the spring in which there is a reversal and the sandstorms, hot air from the desert comes and covers the whole country. However, that Khamsin wind, which disrupts the spring, is like what Ala al-Aswani is describing. Who are the enemy of the democracy and the democratic spring in Egypt? Yes, there is, of course, remnants of the old regime, and those are still in very key positions in the government, in local government. They have not been removed. Second, there are forces that were not part of the old regime, but they are definitely hostile to democracy and freedom. And here I'm referring to a fringe group called Salafis. They are supposedly Islamist. They are the closest thing to the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. Many of them, in fact, were in Saudi Arabia working during the oil boom, and they came back to Egypt after 10, 15 years of being in Saudi Arabia, and they established themselves, and they continue to be supported by the Wahhabis from Saudi Arabia. These are the most imminent danger to the Arab democratic spring in Egypt. And I hope that democratic forces will be able to overcome that challenge.